It is Monday, May 13th, 2019, and welcome to week 2 already of drugs and crimes. And I'm going to spend some time going over the requirements of the assignments for the week, and I'm going to also cover other details in this lecture. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you can see the screen. You can see the instructor information in there. Go down all the way down. Remind you that rubrics are located in each written assignment, which we're going to cover, and then, of course, there's a discussion post-rubric. Remind you that lectures, this is week 2, will take place every Monday, 8:30 to 9:30, or before that. And remember, you're supposed to attend the lecture or listen to the archive and give the keyword or phrase at the end. You can see here the link for the open house, and after this you'll see the link for week 2. So now let's take a look at the announcement for week 2. The history of legislation regulating drug use and abuse. I'm going to cover that, and to prepare for that, you had to read chapters 5 and 8 of Drugs, Crime, and Justice, the textbook, and complete the activities regulation of drug precursors, regulation of synthetic drugs, economics of crack dealing, and then federal drug activity laws. And you're going to discover that I've sent you the corresponding post, the corresponding PowerPoint. So you want to make sure that you have those as well. Please turn off your camera. Turn off your camera. Click on the little camera thing, and it'll close it out. There we go. Thanks. Because it takes up a lot of space there. So, all right. So we're going to keep moving here. Again, our lectures are every Monday, beginning today. As last week you discovered that on, I think it was Friday, I did the initial week 1 open house. Your discussion assignment this week is mandatory drug sentencing for drug-related crimes. Your initial post is due now the way it's going to be pretty much for the weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5 tomorrow by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, or Tuesdays, and then your reply post by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, the course project. This is your first written course project, because last week you didn't have one. What is heroin? And then there's a quiz. And those are due Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. You know what my motto is all about, because I covered that during the open house. Now let's go to the course calendar. Course calendar provides all the details. Again, the full calendar is there all the way through to week 6. And when you click on it, open it up, and it gives you more details there. And then, in addition, your live lecture, which takes place today. And then your initial post, again, due on Tuesday. Your reply post, Wednesday. Course project, first one, and then your quiz. And then you'll see these little checks down here for due dates. And I think the last one is for the key word that you have to give by Sunday, the 19th. And then the due dates for your other 2 assignments there. All right, so there's no excuse for not knowing the amount of time. And then I'll remind you, and you'll hear me say this almost every week, if you go and look at the June calendar, this course ends on the 14th, exactly 1 month from tomorrow. So it doesn't end on the 16th. So people, they didn't have notice. I do make sure that you're aware of that as well. Okay. So that's it for that. Let's get right into the module itself. I remind you again that with your assignments, there's the Drugs and Crime course guide, and I went over that last week. And I'll open it up one more time. After this, I won't open it again. And it tells you about, so I can open this up, and it allows, there we go. And it's for finding newspapers and things that you need. But notice if you click on Module 2, it starts to tell you step by step, talks about the course project, tells you how to find sources and things like that. Talks about government websites. And then this is further information that can help you as schedule appointments, 30-minute appointment with resources. To make an appointment with a criminal justice tutor and tutor match, which can help you, as I talked about tutoring last week, and this gives more information about it. And APA, again, remind you the importance of APA, and it tells you where tutoring is available for APA. It helps you to understand how tutoring works, the APA guide, the writing guide, or the writing lab. And the writing lab, as I already have shared before, you can click on that. If you were to open that up, it tells you the details I shared last week. So it's very important that you utilize these resources to help you in terms of getting your assignments completed. And every week you'll see that. So now let's look at the assignments for the week. So here we are, the first one, the course project. And it tells you to begin your course project. In your first course project, learn more about heroin by doing research about the drug, its source, methods, use, and effects. And read the little story down here. And then notice the requirements, which I'll show you again in the rubric in just a minute. Remember, I explained to you the rubrics are very important in producing quality written assignments. After conducting research is always so critical. You'll write a paper, a minimum of 3 pages. That does not include the cover page or the reference page. And it'll involve these 4 bullet points. You have to have at least a minimum of 3 credible, reliable resources. Okay? And in doing your research, and other than your textbook does not count. So it says, do not rely or cite information from Wikipedia. I've said this over and over, and they put this information in here because we're dogmatic about that. You will get a lot of points for using Wikipedia. Proper citations for your sources. The cover page and reference pages are not included, I already told you, as the page count. Then if you need assignment help, I just showed you the Module 2 tab in the guide that I just shared with you. So here is, you click on this, there is the due date, which is this Sunday, the 19th, coming up, okay, 1 week from yesterday. This tells you your possible points, your rubric. View it right here. Here it is. This is what I use to grade you. and you're going to provide the details. Remember, what is said in the module will match up with it. 3 credible sources, 3 credible, other than the text. And then 3-page minimum length. Paragraphs. Remember, paragraphs should be, I've had students to write paragraphs that are so long. And the paragraph should be an average of 5 to 6 sentences and should have a topic, a thesis, and then you go ahead and provide your information. When you get to the next topic, do another paragraph. Double space, not single space, by the way. And then here's the source about APA citations, and again, a reminder of not to use Wikipedia. And that's how you get your 40 points. You'll find that this is exactly the same, and this is different, but it'll be pretty much the same throughout the course project for this course. This is where your information will vary, but you got to make sure you follow what the assignment says to maximize your points. Okay, so then we go back to the next assignment. There's your discussion post, and you're going to deal with this fact. Conduct research to learn more about mandatory sentencing laws for drug-related criminal activities. And then you're going to use this scenario. And then for your first post, discuss whether or not you agree with the 3-year mandatory sentence in Mary's case. So when you'll read about what happened with Mary here. And then, so then you're going to determine whether or not the 3 years are appropriate under the circumstances, and if not, why not? Include information to support your position. Reply post, of course, that's due Saturday. And remember, try to reply to as many posts as possible. I appreciate that, and it's very important. And be sure to include proper citations that you relied upon for the information. Very, very, very important. I'm not really dogmatic on citations, but usually in this particular course, I do look at them. I don't deduct points, but it does demonstrate that you did do some research, and it helps you with producing quality initial and reply posts. Again, for tips on how to get this done properly, then you can go to the guides, Rasmussen.edu 1233, but you know about that already. Then finally, there are 2 things. The quiz. This is a time quiz. You'll have 1 opportunity to complete this. There's 30 minutes, and when you the best way to prepare is to read, listen to the lecture, and then use the PowerPoints to help you review. You should not have these sources out when you take an exam. It's a closed book exam. Remember that you are agreeing to abide by the academic misconduct policy. As students should understand, again, as I stressed last week, the importance of ethics and making sure that you don't violate the academic misconduct policy. Very, 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 very important. Okay, and I want to share a video with you real quick in just a few minutes, and then your live classroom lecture. Okay, that's your assignment. So now let me go back, and I want to take a minute, and I want to share this video with you. It is in the resources tab. Let me move this out of the way. Here we go. So you go to resources, and I'm going to take off my headset. View this. And take a few minutes and look at this video.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is making decisions in your academic life that are based on honesty, trust, fairness, responsibility, and respect. This means being honest in the work you do, while respecting the work that others do. So what is cheating? Cheating means distributing or receiving answers or information by any means other than those expressly permitted by an assignment's requirement or an instructor. Some examples of cheating include asking fellow students for answers or copying answers during a test, using notes, devices, or materials during the test that your instructor has not approved, purchasing papers from websites or other sources, copying your classmate's work, assisting a classmate in misconduct, and other violations as noted in the academic integrity policy that can be found in all course syllabi. Always ask your professor if it's okay to use notes during the test or to work together with classmates on an assignment or quiz. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism means using another individual's work without giving them credit or taking another person's work and claiming it as your work. Some examples of plagiarism are turning in an assignment that someone else wrote, copying words or ideas from someone else. This can be a library resource, course textbook, internet resource, or other material without giving the original creator credit, failing to put quoted works in quotation marks, or using someone else's ideas in your essays, but changing a few of the words to make it sound like the words are your own. Plagiarism is not just about written words and ideas. It's possible to plagiarize images, graphs, coding, or video as well. So how can you avoid plagiarism? Cite your sources, both in the body of your paper as in-text citations and on your references page. Whenever you want to use words, images, media, or ideas that were created by another person, you should cite that person appropriately as the source of that information.
But how does academic integrity relate to the work world? Isn't it just a college thing?
No. Integrity in the workplace starts with good practices and skills built while you are a student. Would you turn in a project document to your manager as your own when someone else wrote it? Not if you want to keep your job. Individuals can be reprimanded or even fired from their job for plagiarism. Following academic integrity guidelines while you are in school builds those skills and ethical practices that carry through to the workforce.
Okay, I understand how they're connected, but what do I do if I need more help?
If you have questions on the academic integrity policy, consult your course syllabus, talk with your instructor or dean, and if you need assistance with APA citation style or how to avoid plagiarism, contact the Rasmussen library team through our live chat or schedule a research appointment on our library website or through the resources tab of your course. If you would like APA tutoring, schedule an appointment with one of our peer tutors on the course resources tab.
Okay. All right. So that's it. I meant to include that last week, but I wanted to make sure that we went over it. And you can always go under your resources tab and look at that again. It is very, very, very important that you understand. And you heard me say many of the things during my last lecture in the syllabus about academic integrity. You heard me talk about citations and why we are so important, so dogmatic about APA citations. There are students who are in my classes who know me from other classes. They don't understand sometimes why I say this. There's no half right way to do this. It's either right or it's wrong. That's why you lose points if you don't do it totally correctly. But we're trying to give you good habits. Again, it does translate into your workplace, and that's very, 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 very important. All right. So anyway, those are your assignments. So now let's get into the module itself. And let's look at the course content. And what we're going to do is we're going to cover regulation of drug precursors, regulation of synthetic drugs, and the video Freakonomics of crack dealing. I'm going to try to have you to take a look at that. Drug laws, federal drug laws activities. And then I've already talked about the course project, the discussion, and the quiz. All right. So what about this thing? What about this thing that we're dealing with called drugs? Marijuana, cocaine, heroin. It talks about plants. They grow. You grow these. All right. But there's other things that are manufactured. You'll hear us talk about meth or methamphetamine. It is a cooked item. It is a combination of household chemicals, products, as it says, and it's a relatively simple thing. If you look at some of the things that are listed in here, it talks about to make meth. Think about this now. This is what goes into your body when you're using methamphetamine. Paint thinner, acetone, ammonia, iodine crystals, drain cleaner. Think about this. Stuff that you're putting down your drain is used to make these manufactured drugs. Battery acid, lithium taken from batteries, and other ingredients that are found in cold medicines and things like this. These are all what make the drug more dangerous and can result in brain damage. And the items that are used here provide problematic issues for people. One of the things that happened with cocaine is the rock-like powdery substance is crack. Crack is a cheap high, but it can be ingested through a number of ways: smoking it, snorting, or even injecting it. And a lot of people, what they do is they take crack cocaine, they spend a small amount of money, and they're putting this stuff in their body. And it is also very dangerous. I was the village attorney in a town called Ford Heights. It was known as the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs. That's also where I was a part-time police officer and investigator. And there were instances where fires would take place in these houses, and the reason is because they were used to manufacture crack cocaine and other things. Meth labs, they were used, and very, very dangerous. And they caught fires, and they exploded, and all kinds of various type situations. So the federal government is trying to attack these types of crimes and have passed laws such as the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act of 2005. And what it does is this: is pretty much says that there are certain items that are used to cook this stuff or manufacture them are locked in cabinets. And then in order to buy them, consumers have to show identification and sign a logbook. And the reason for that is so that they can recognize and monitor who's buying these things. So guess what? What's happening is that legal drug dealers are taking, illegal drug dealers, I should say, are taking individuals who don't have criminal backgrounds and doing this. If you have a criminal background, you're probably not going to do this. But it is just one attempt at trying to deal with meth. It says Mexican drug trafficking, is where a lot of this stuff is manufactured and it's brought in to the country across the border. And there are other ways it comes. Now, notice this. It is not that the walls that are being built can stop these things, because you'll find that, as some of you already know about El Chapo. El Chapo was convicted, notorious drug kingpin dealing with a drug cartel out of Mexico. Most of the drugs that came in came through what we call legal checkpoints. It wasn't that you could build a wall, because at these legal checkpoints, they would put these items or drugs that were manufactured in cars. They would put it in the paneling of the cars, the seats, even the engine blocks. They would have it in the trunks under the bottom where the tires were. And so the point of the matter is that these laws, and it asks the question, your state probably has a law restricting the purchase of pseudoephedrine, ephedrine, or phenylpropamine. The purpose for these, again, is to try to monitor them. You should be aware of the fact that these laws are not perfect, but there are some attempts to try to control them. But you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again in this course, is that drugs cannot continue to flourish unless there are users. And unfortunately, people continue to use the drugs. And the bad part about it is you should be aware that it is very easy to become addicted to these drugs. Even one time can change your whole life. And you're going to discover that as we look at some videos in this course here. So now let's talk about synthetic drugs. These are items like, for example, they look like, and look at the picture here. They look like candy. They look innocent, but these are made in labs, and you have K2, spice, and all of these things are manufactured. And see, what happens is they'll take something as simple as marijuana and lace it with this stuff, and it is sold in a lot of stores, and nobody knows what's really in them. But you could be aware and should be aware that there are chemicals that are utilized in these synthetic cannabinoids that come into the United States from other countries. Notice this, it talks about Asia and China and places like that. These things are used. Now, be aware that individuals are subject many times to drug tests. But here's something that you should be aware of about these illegal cannabinoids. And it says it right here in our little section here. Drug screening or urinalysis cannot detect them, which makes them that individuals who are on probation or in jobs where they have to pass drug tests even without notice, they use these. And so there are warnings out to explain, and I have to keep telling people, I says, you've got to understand what these things do. People go into cardiac arrest. Their blood pressure elevates. Their heart is almost like exploding. It's like, for example, I tell people I don't drink these power drinks because it races the heart and increases it. Well, that's the same thing that these synthetic cannabinoids do to your body as well. Produce, look at this, unconsciousness. vomiting, seizures, hallucination, agitation, and anxiety. And it's a tragedy what's happening in our country regarding these. So in order to try to fight this, another law was passed, Synthetic Drug Abuse Prevention Act, which, as it says, permanently places 26 types of synthetic cannabinoids into Schedule 1, which you all know about that from last week. And many states, 43 of our states, have taken action to control one or more of these, including our present state. And that prior to 2010, cannabinoids were not controlled by any state or at the federal level. Think about that. And at least 44 states have taken action to control one or more of these. So it's an epidemic. Now, you're going to hear me say this. There is a strong correlation between drugs and crime because people commit crimes to support their habits, such as robberies, burglaries, thefts, and sometimes there are violent offenses that take place not because they want to be violent, but because the body is saying they need these drugs, and people will do whatever is necessary. They'll even steal from their own mother. They'll steal things out of your house, and computers and even TVs, and pawn them and sell them so that they can have money for drugs. So it's a problem. The drug enforcement agencies, DEA, is dealing with this at all aspects of it. Brings me to bath salts, and you know these are designer. Once again, we're talking about manufacturer drugs. Now look at what kind of things go into that. Plant food, air freshener, and these things will trick people into thinking that they're not that serious. But bath salts are ingested by sniffing primarily or snorting, and it can result in a stroke, a heart attack, death. It says agitation, insomnia, irritability, dizziness, depression, paranoia. Let's look at the whole list. Delusion, suicidal thoughts, and sometimes actually suicide itself, seizures, and panic attacks. These are just some of the things. And the things I already told you earlier, the heart increases, the rapid rate, the pains that come in the chest. People have nosebleed, sweating, nausea, and vomiting. And, you know, it is really, really tragic. It's reaching our schools, people, our grammar schools, not just our high schools and junior high schools, but our grammar schools. There was I remember this so well, that happened in Miami. I haven't been to Miami, but I read about it and, you know, did some research on it, where look at what happened with this thing called zombie, where a person high on bath salts, as it says, chewed on the face of a homeless man. He was actually eating flesh, you know, and these are the kinds of things. So you are just out of your mind. So when it says zombie, it means that zombieism, you're thinking about cannibalism and eating human flesh. And these are some of the things that come about when people use these bath salts. And so there are other laws that are passed, other regulations. Again, these are dangerous. They are very, very dangerous. And we're trying to, as a country, to come up with these solutions to dealing with it. There's legislation being passed constantly. There's Drug Awareness Week, Synthetic Drug Awareness Week, and all of these things. But it is a very, very, very serious serious issue. All right. So now I want to take a little bit, and I want you to listen to this Freakonomics. There's a lot of bad language in here, but it is very, very interesting. And I'm not going to do the federal criminal law activities. You can do those on your own, which helps you to read these questions and go over. This is something to help you prepare. But I want to take a few minutes now, and I want to go into this TED Talk. It's about 21 minutes or so, which is going to take up most of our time. So I'm going to put this on, and then I'm going to give you some closed captioning. Let's see, where's my closed captioning? I thought I had it. Oh, there it is.
I'll be talking not about my own tragedy, but other people's tragedy. It's going to be lighthearted about other people's tragedy than your own, and I want to keep in the spirit of the conference. So if you believe the media account, being a drug dealer in the height of the crack cocaine epidemic was a very glamorous life, in the words of Virginia Pastel. There's money, there's drugs, guns, women, you name it, jewelry, bling bling, it had it all. Okay? What I'm here to tell you today is that, in fact, based on 10 years of research, a unique opportunity to go inside a gang, to see the actual books, the financial records of the gang, that the answer turns out not to be that being in the gang was a glamorous life, but I think more realistically, that being in a gang, selling drugs for a gang, is perhaps the worst job in all of America. And that's what I'd like to convince you of today. Okay, so there's three things I want to do. First, I want to explain how and why crack cocaine had such a profound influence on inner city gangs. Secondly, I want to tell you how somebody like me came to be able to see the inner workings of a gang. It's an interesting story, I think. And then third, I want to tell you in a very superficial way about some of the things we found when we actually got to look at the financial records, the books of the gang. Okay, so before I do that, just one warning, which is that this presentation has been rated R by the Motion Picture Association of America. It contains adult themes, adult language. Given who's up on the stage, you'll be delighted to know that, in fact, there'll be no nudity, barring unexpected wardrobe malfunctions aside. Okay, so let me start by talking about crack cocaine and how it transformed the gang. Okay, and to do that, you have to actually go back to a time before crack cocaine in the early 80s and look at it from the perspective of a gang leader. Okay, so being a gang leader in the inner city wasn't such a bad deal in the mid-80s, the early 80s, some would say. Now, you had a lot of power, you got to beat people up, you got a lot of prestige, a lot of respect. But the thing is, there was no money in it. Okay? The gang had no way to make money. You couldn't charge dues to the people in the gang because the people in the gang didn't have any money. Couldn't really make any money selling marijuana. Marijuana's too cheap, it turns out. There's just no market for being. You can't get rich selling marijuana. You couldn't sell cocaine. So cocaine's a great product, powder cocaine, but you got to know rich white people. And most of the inner city gang members didn't know any rich white people. They couldn't sell that market. You couldn't really do petty crime either. Because petty crime is a terrible way to do it. So as a result, as a gang leader, you had, power, it's a pretty good life. But the thing was, in the end, you were living at home with your mother. And so it wasn't really a career. So something that, there were limits to how powerful and important you could be if you had to live at home with your mother. Okay. Then along comes crack cocaine. Okay? And in the words of Malcolm Gladwell, crack cocaine was the extra chunky version of tomato sauce for the inner city. Okay? Because crack cocaine was an unbelievable innovation. I don't have time to talk about it today. But if you think about it, I would say that in the last 25 years, of every invention or innovation that's occurred in this country, the biggest one in terms of impact on the well-being of people who live in the inner city was crack cocaine. Okay, and for the worse, not for the better, for the worse. It had a huge impact on life. So what was it about crack cocaine? It was a brilliant way of getting the brain high. okay? Because you can smoke crack cocaine and you can smoke crack cocaine, you can't smoke powder cocaine. And smoking is a much more efficient mechanism for delivering a high than it is snorting it. And it turned out there was this audience that didn't know it wanted crack cocaine, but when it came, it really did. And it was a perfect drug you could sell for, buy the cocaine that went in for $1, sell it for $5, highly addictive. The high was very short. So for 15 minutes, you get this great high. And then when you come down, all you want to do is get high again. Okay, it created a wonderful market. And for the people who were there running the gang, it was a great way, seemingly, to make a lot of money. These are the people who come. Okay, so this is where we enter the picture. Not really me. I'm really a bit player in all this. My co-author, Sudhir Venkatesh, is the main character. Okay? So he was a math major in college who had a good heart and decided he wanted to be get a sociology PhD. Came to the University of Chicago. So the 3 months before he came to Chicago, he had spent following the Grateful Dead. And in his own words, he looked like a freak. Okay? He's a South Asian, very dark-skinned South Asian, big man, and he had hair, in his words, down to his ass. Okay? Defied all kinds of boundaries. Was he black or white? Was he man or woman? It was really a curious sight to be seen. So he showed up at the University of Chicago, and the famous sociologist William Julius Wilson was doing a book that involved surveying people all across Chicago. And he took one look at Sudhir, who was going to go do some surveys for him, and decided he knew exactly the place to send him, which was to one of the toughest, most notorious housing projects, not just in Chicago, but in the entire United States. So Sudhir, the suburban boy who never lived in the inner city, dutifully took his clipboard and, walked down to this housing project, gets to the first building. First building, well, there's nobody there, but he hears some voices up in the stairwell. So he climbs up the stairwell. He comes around the corner and finds a group of young African-American men playing dice. Okay. This is about 1990, peak of the crack epidemic. This is a very dangerous job being in a gang. You don't like to be surprised. You don't like to be surprised by people coming around the corner. And the mantra was, shoot first, ask questions later. Okay. Now, Sudhir was lucky. He was such a freak. And that clipboard probably saved his life because he figured no other rival gang member would be coming up to shoot at them with a clipboard. So his greeting was not particularly warm, but they did say, well, okay, let's hear your questions on your survey. So I kid you not, the first question on the survey that he was sent to ask was, how do you feel about being born black? Makes you wonder about academics, okay? So the choices of answers were very good. Good. Yeah, very good. What Sudhir found out is, in fact, that the real answer was the following. The survey was not, in the end, going to be what got Sudhir off the hook. He was held hostage overnight in the stairwell. There was a lot of gunfire. There were a lot of philosophical discussions he had with the gang members. By morning, the gang leader arrived, checked out Sudhir, decided he wasn't no threat, and they let him go home. So Sudhir went home, took a shower, took a nap, and you and I, probably faced with a situation, would think, well, I guess I'm going to write my dissertation on the Grateful Dead after following the last 3 months. Sudhir, on the other hand, got right back, walked down to the housing project, went up to the floor, the second floor, and said, hey guys, I had so much fun hanging out with you last night. I wonder if I could do it again tonight. And that was the beginning, what turned out to be a beautiful relationship that involved Sudhir living in the housing project on and off for 10 years, hanging out in crack houses, going to jail with the gang members, having the car window shot out of his car, having the police break into his apartment and steal his computer disks, you name it. But ultimately, the story has a happy ending for Sudhir, who became one of the most respected sociologists in the country, and especially for me, as I sat in my office with my Excel spreadsheet open, waiting for Sudhir to come and deliver to me the latest load of data that he would get from the game. It's one of the most unequal co-authoring relationships ever, but I was glad to be the beneficiary. Okay, so what do we find? What do we find in the gang? Well, let me say one thing. So what we got, we really got access to everybody in the gang. We got an inside look at the gang from the very bottom up to the very top. They trusted Sudhir. in ways that really no academic has ever, or really anybody, any outsider has ever earned the trust of these gangs. To the point where they actually opened up what was most interesting for me is their books, their financial records that they kept, and they made them available to us. We not only could study them, but we could ask them questions about what was in them. So if I have to kind of summarize very quickly in the short time I have, what the sort of the bottom line of what I take away from the gang is that if I had to draw a parallel between the gang and any other organization, it would be that the gang is just like McDonald's, okay, in a lot of different respects, the restaurant McDonald's. Okay, so first, in one way, which isn't maybe the most interesting way, but it's a good way to start, is in the way it's organized, the hierarchy of gang, the way it looks. So here's what the org chart of the gang looks like. I don't know if any of you know very much about org charts, but if you were to kind of strip down and simplify McDonald's org chart, this is exactly what the org chart would look like. Now, it's amazing, but the top level of the gang, they actually call themselves the board of directors. Okay? And Shadir says, it's not like these guys had a very sophisticated kind of view of like what happened in American corporate life, but they had seen movies like Wall Street, and they kind of had learned like a little bit about what it was like to be in the real world. Now, below that board of directors, you've got essentially what are regional VPs, people who control, say, the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago. Shadir got to know very well the guy who had the unfortunate assignment of trying to take the Iowa franchise, which it turned out for this black gang was not one of the more brilliant financial endeavors that they undertook. Okay. But the thing that really makes the gang seem like McDonald's is its franchising. The guys who are running, the local gangs, the 4 square block by 4 square block areas, they're just like the guys, in some sense, who are running the McDonald's. They are the entrepreneurs. They get the exclusive property rights to control the drug selling. They get the name of the gang behind them for merchandising and marketing. And they're the ones who basically make the profit or lose the profit depending on how good they are at running the business. Now, the group I really want you to think about, though, are the ones at the bottom, the foot soldiers. Okay, these are the teenagers typically who'd be standing out on the street corner selling the drugs. Extremely dangerous work. And important to note that almost all of the weight, all of the people in this organization are at the bottom. Okay, just like McDonald's. So in some sense, the foot soldiers are a lot like the people who are taking the order at McDonald's. And it's not just by chance they're like them. In fact, in these neighborhoods, they'd be the same people. So the same kids who were working in the gang were actually, at the very same time, they would typically be working part-time at a place like McDonald's. Okay, which already, I think, foreshadows the main results that I've talked about what a crappy job it was being in the gang. Because obviously, if being in the gang was such a wonderful, lucrative job, why in the world would these guys moonlight at McDonald's? Okay, so what do the wages look like? So you might be surprised, but based on the actual, being able to talk to them and to see their records, this is what it looks like in terms of the wages. The hourly wage the foot soldiers were earning was $3.50 an hour. It was below the minimum wage. Okay, this is well documented. It's easy to see by the patterns of consumption they have. It really is not fiction, it's fact. There was very little money in the gang, especially at the bottom. Now, if you manage to rise up, say, and be that local leader, the guy who's equivalent to the McDonald's franchisee, you'd be making $100,000 a year. And that, in some ways, was the best job you could hope to get if you were growing up in one of these neighborhoods as a young black male. If you manage to rise to the very top, $200,000 or $400,000 a year is what you'd hope to make. Truly, you would be a great success story. And one of the sad parts of it is that, indeed, among the many other ramifications of crack cocaine, is that the most talented individuals in these communities, this is what they were striving for. They weren't trying to make it in legitimate ways because there were no legitimate channels out. This was the best way out. And it actually was the right choice, probably, to try to make it out this way. You look at this, the relationship with McDonald's breaks down here. The money looks about the same. Why is it such a bad job? Well, the reason it's such a bad job is that there's somebody shooting at you a lot of the time. Okay? So we're shooting at you. What are the death rates? Okay? We found in our gang, and admittedly, this was not really sort of a standard situation. This was a game of a time of intense violence, of a lot of gang wars. That this gang actually became quite successful, but there were costs. So the death rate, not to mention the rate of being arrested, sent to prison, being wounded, the death rate in our sample was 7% per person per year. You're in the gang for 4 years, you expect to die with about a 25% likelihood. Okay? That is about as high as you can get. So just for comparison's purposes, let's think about some other walk of life where you may expect might be extremely risky. Like let's say that you were a murderer and you were convicted of murder and you're sent to death row. Turns out that the death rates on death row from all causes, including execution, 2% a year. Okay? So it's a lot safer being on death row than it is selling drugs out on the street. Okay? That makes you pause, gives you some pause. Those of you who believe that the death penalty is going to have an enormous deterrent effect on crime. Now, to give you a sense of just how bad the inner city was during crash, I'm not really talking about, I'm not really focusing on the negative, but really there's another story to tell you there. If you look at the death rates just of random young black males growing up in the inner city in the United States, the death rates during crack were about 1%. That's extremely high. This is violent death. It's unbelievable in some sense. Put it into perspective, if you compare this to the soldiers in Iraq, for instance, right now, fighting the war, 0.5%. So in some very literal way, the young black men who were growing up in this country were living in a war zone, very much in the sense of the way that the soldiers over in Iraq are fighting a war. Okay, so why in the world, you might ask, would anybody be willing to stand out on a street corner selling drugs for $3.50 an hour with a 25% chance of dying over the next 4 years? Why would they do that? Okay? And I think there are a couple answers. I think the first one is that they got fooled by history. It used to be the gang with a rite of passage, that the young people controlled the gang, that as you got older, you dropped out of the gang. So what happened was the people who happened to be in the right place at the right time, people who happened to be leading the gang in the mid to late 80s became very, very wealthy. And so the logical thing to think was that, well, the next generation, so they're going to age out of the game like everybody else does, and the next generation is going to take over and get the wealth. Okay? So there's striking similarities, I think, to the internet boom. Right? The first set of people in Silicon Valley got very, very rich. And then all my friends said, maybe I should go do that too. And they were very cheap for stock options that never came. Okay? In some sense, that's what happened exactly to the set of people we were looking at, is that they were willing to start at the bottom, just like, say, a lawyer at a law firm, a first-year lawyer is willing to start at the bottom, work 80-hour weeks for not that much money, because they think they're going to make partner. But what happened was the rules changed, and they never got to make partner. Indeed, the same people who were running all of the major gangs in the late 1980s are still running the major gangs in Chicago today. They never passed on any of the wealth, so everybody got stuck at that $3.50 an hour job, and it turned out to be a disaster. The other thing the gang was very, very good at was marketing and trickery. And so, for instance, one thing the gang would do is, the gang leaders would have big entourages, and they'd drive fancy cars, and have fancy jewelry. So what Sadira eventually realized, as he hung out with them more, is that really, they didn't own those cars, they just leased them, because they couldn't afford to own the fancy cars. And they didn't really have gold jewelry, they had gold-plated jewelry. It goes back to the real versus the fake real. And really, they did all sorts of things to trick the young people into thinking what a great deal the gang was going to be. So, for instance, they would give a 14-year-old kid, they'd give him a whole, roll of bills to hold. That 14-year-old kid would say, oh, well, you kid was spent, hey, look at all the money I got in the gang. It wasn't his money until he spent it, and then essentially he was in debt to the gang or sort of an indentured servant for a while. Okay, so I have a couple minutes. Let me do one other thing I hadn't thought I'd have time to do, which is to talk about what we learn more generally about economics from the study of the game. Okay? So economists tend to talk in technical words. Often our theories fail quite miserably when we go to the data. But actually what's kind of interesting is that in this setting, it turned out that some of the economic theories that worked not so well in the real economy work very well in the drug economy. In some sense, it's better capitalism. Here's an economic principle. This is one of the basic ideas in labor economics. It's called the compensating differential. It's the idea that basically the increment in wages that a worker requires to leave him indifferent between performing two tasks, one which is more unpleasant than the other. That's what you call a compensating differential. It's why we think garbage men might be paid more than people who work in parks. Okay? So in the words of the gang, one of the members of the gang, I think makes this clear. So it turns out, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. It turns out in the gang, when there's a war going on, that they actually pay the foot soldiers twice as much money. Okay, it's exactly this concept, because they're not willing to be at risk. So in the words of the gang member, captures it quite nicely. Just, would you stand around here when all this shit that I'm shooting, if all this shit's going on? No, right. So if I kind of be asked to put my life on the line, then fuck me the cash, man. So essentially, I think the gang member says it much more articulately than does the economist about what's going on. Here's another one. So economists talk about game theory, that every two-person game has a Nash equilibrium. Here's the translation you get from a gang member. They're talking about the decision of why they don't go shoot. One thing that turns out to be a great business tactic in the gang is to go and just shoot in the air, just shoot guns in the other gang's territory. All the people afraid to go buy the guns there, they're going to come into your neighborhood. But here's what he says about why they don't do that. He says, if we start shooting around there in the other gang's territory, nobody, and I mean you dig it, nobody going to step on the turf. But we got to be careful, because they can shoot around here too, and then we all fuck. Okay? So that's exactly the same concept. But then again, sometimes economists get it wrong. So one thing we observed in the data is that it looked like, in terms of the gang leader always got paid. Okay? He always, no matter how bad it was economically, he always got himself paid. So we had some theories related to cash flow and lack of access to capital markets and things like that. And then we asked the gang member, well, why did you always get paid? Your workers don't always get paid. His response is, you got all these niggers below you who want your job, you dig? If you start taking losses, continuous weak and shit. Okay? I thought about it. CEOs often pay themselves $1 million bonuses, even when companies are losing a lot of money. And it never would really occur to economists that this idea of weak and shit could really be important. So maybe weak and shit is an important hypothesis. Thank you very much.
Okay, that video kind of, as they say, makes it pretty clear the kind of things that take place in the drug world. But you should, in the gang world, I was a lawyer for many gangs, and it operated on those bases. And, you know, they were always, we were always representing in court as defense attorneys those street individuals. Those were willing to lay down their lives, and, you know, they didn't get a lot of money, and you know what, I'm going to tell you something, starting my video back again, that those individuals found themselves being sacrificial lambs. They would go to jail, and then they would get little money that was thrown to the family for them. They would take the rap for somebody else. But here's the point. The point is that dealing with drug and crack dealing, it's not as they say, there's not a great retirement benefit to it, a great fund that's laid out. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. And it's interesting because people deal crack, I mean, it's so cheap. It is so inexpensive. So people get cheap highs, and then they have all the problems that we talked about earlier before. So again, I want to go back to this federal drug law, and then you're going to read this, and you're going to put your answer, and then you go through each of these, review each of these flashcards, and they will help you to understand. And so I'm going to go back to the classroom. Any questions from either of you? If so, type in the chat box so that everyone can see. If you don't type anything, I presume you don't have any questions. Any questions about the assignments or anything that you want to ask me as well? Okay. All right. None. I don't see any. So if any occur to you, you know what to do. You know how to reach out to me. You're going to discover as we go through, by the end of this course, there's going to be some really devastating things that you're going to be able to see, and you may have heard about. But I can tell you that when I was a police officer in that town I told you about, I saw some really bad things happen with individuals who were using crack cocaine and other types of drugs. Later on, we're going to cover dealing with how heroin adversely affects the lives of people, how there's an epidemic that's going on. And then we're going to talk about what law enforcement is doing coming up in future weeks. And so it's about 9:30. It's about time for me to adjourn. And I want to give you the phrase crack cocaine. That's it. That's what I want you to give me to get your points. Again, if you have any questions about any of the assignments that you have, feel free to text me, email me, call me any hour of the day, as I said, except the 25th hour of the day. Again, I remind my students that if you want to, reach out to me and find out some things that's going on with me too, that you could send me a Facebook request. And my Facebook is Richard Wright JD. And, so, yeah. Thank you, Shay. And friend request. You're already my friend on Facebook. So, yep. So, and I think you saw my sermon, right? You saw my sermon I preached yesterday. Did you see that? Yep. Yeah, and so I enjoy that as well. I'm a multifaceted individual. Yes, I did. I did see your choir. As a matter of fact, my wife loves choirs, and she loves to sing. You're going to see some stuff in there with her singing. She plays the organ, but we have a musician now. But yeah, she preaches. My sons sing and preach as well, especially Richard Jr. You hear him on the drums. But anyway, so yeah, thank you for supporting that event. And I hope everybody, I don't know if any of you guys are mothers here, but had a happy Mother's Day. Yesterday was not just Mother's Day for us, but I had, you're welcome. We had 2 birthdays. One of my daughters turned 48, and my son, Richard Jr., he turned 24. So, thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Well, okay, guys, I'm going to say good night to you, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next week, same time, same bat channel, as we continue on. And as I remind students all the time, thank you, it is so important to keep up contemporaneously with these assignments, because I'm going to tell you something, 5.5 weeks, let me tell you something. Next week, after next week, we'll be halfway through this course, believe it or not. That's point 3. So you need to be aware. You got to stay on up on this. It's a quick ride, and it's over, as I said, June 14th. So I'm going to say good night to you guys. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time.